The handcuffs clicked around Patricia Whitfield's wrists as she shrieked like a banshee in my driveway, her perfectly manicured nails clawing at the air, while my son Ryan, in full sheriff's deputy uniform, read her rights. Just 20 minutes earlier, this same woman had called 911, claiming I was a dangerous vagrant breaking into my own family ranch. But when the responding officer turned out to be my own flesh and blood, her face went from triumphant to terrified in about 3 seconds flat. The sun was barely peeking over the Rocky Mountains when I pulled my weathered pickup truck through the gates of Montgomery Ranch for the first time in 15 years. My name is Jack Montgomery, 62 years old. And after my wife Sarah passed away from cancer 6 months ago, I decided it was time to come home. The ranch had been sitting empty since my father died, maintained by a property management company, but never truly lived in 300 acres of prime Colorado grassland with views that could make a grown man weep. As I stepped out of the truck and breathed in that familiar smell of sage and pine, I felt Sarah's presence beside me, whispering that this was where we were meant to spend our final chapters together, even if she could only be there in spirit. I was unloading boxes from the truck bed when I heard the unmistakable sound of an engine revving too hard for the dirt road leading to my property. A pristine white Range Rover came barreling around the bend, kicking up enough dust to coat everything within 50 feet. The vehicle screeched to a halt just inches from my truck's bumper, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd walked straight out of a country club catalog. Patricia Whitfield, though I didn't know her name yet, stood there in pressed khaki pants and a coral blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Her blonde hair was styled in that helmet-like way that suggested she spent more time at the salon than anywhere else, and her lips were pursed like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Excuse me," she said in a voice that could cut glass, "but you're trespassing on private property. This area is part of the Mountain View Estates community, and we don't tolerate vagrants." I set down the box I was holding and turned to face her fully, keeping my expression neutral despite the immediate irritation bubbling up in my chest. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "I'm Jack Montgomery, and this is Montgomery Ranch. Has been in my family since 1947. I think you might be confused about the property lines." Her eyes narrowed to slits as she pulled out her phone like it was a weapon. "I don't care what sob story you're peddling. I'm the president of the Mountain View Estates Homeowners Association, and I know every property in this area. This ranch was abandoned years ago, and we've been maintaining the perimeter as part of our community beautification project." I couldn't help but chuckle at that. "Beautification project? Lady? This is a working ranch, not some suburban lawn. And I've got the deed right here in my glove compartment if you'd like to see it." She took a step back, her nose wrinkling like she'd smelled something foul. "Don't you lady me. I'm calling the authorities right now. We have strict regulations about who can and cannot reside in this area. And someone like you clearly doesn't meet our standards." The way she said "someone like you" made it clear she'd already sized me up and found me wanting. My faded jeans, work boots, and flannel shirt apparently didn't meet her dress code for acceptable neighbors. As she dramatically dialed 911, I continued unloading my truck, figuring there was no point in arguing with someone who'd already made up their mind. "Yes, this is Patricia Whitfield, president of Mountain View Estates HOA," she said loudly into the phone, making sure I could hear every word. "I need police assistance immediately. There's a transient individual who's broken into the old Montgomery Ranch property. He's claiming to own it. But I know for a fact this property has been vacant for years. He's probably a squatter or worse. Please send units right away. I fear for my safety." I shook my head and went back to my work, pulling out a box labeled "Kitchen" in Sarah's neat handwriting. Even seeing her penmanship made my chest tighten with grief. But I pushed through it. This was what she'd wanted, for me to start fresh, to go back to my roots. Patricia continued her performance, pacing back and forth in her designer shoes that were completely impractical for ranch terrain. "He's got a truck full of boxes. He's probably stealing from the property. Oh my God, he might be armed. Please hurry." 20 minutes later, a sheriff's department cruiser rolled up the drive, lights flashing but no siren. I recognized the vehicle model immediately. My son Ryan had been talking about the department's new fleet for months, What Patricia didn't know was that Ryan had recently been assigned to this district after 5 years working in Denver. He'd actually been the one to encourage me to move back to the ranch, saying it would be good to have family close by again. The cruiser door opened, and out stepped my son, all 6 feet 2 inches of him, looking sharp in his uniform with his badge catching the morning light. The expression on Patricia's face when she saw him was priceless. She immediately rushed toward him, her arms waving frantically. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is trespassing," and refused to leave when I confronted him. "I'm Patricia Whitfield, HOA president, and I can assure you this property is supposed to be vacant." Ryan's eyes found mine over Patricia's shoulder, and I saw the corner of his mouth twitch slightly. Fighting back a smile, he maintained his professional demeanor as he approached. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and step back." "Sir, can you please explain what's happening here?" I set down the box I was holding and walked over, extending my hand to my son with a grin. "Officer Montgomery, good to see you. I'm Jack Montgomery, and I'm moving back into my family's ranch. This lady seems to think I'm trespassing on my own property." The color drained from Patricia's face so fast I thought she might faint. "Montgomery? You're related?" Ryan nodded, his expression growing more serious. "This is my father, ma'am, and this ranch has been in our family for over 70 years. Now, can you explain why you called in a false report claiming he was a transient breaking into the property?" Patricia sputtered, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. I didn't know. He doesn't look like. The property has been empty for so long, and we've been monitoring it as part of our community watch program." Ryan pulled out his notepad, and I could see Patricia's panic increasing. "Ma'am, did you identify yourself as HOA president when you confronted my father?" She nodded reluctantly. "And did you threaten him or attempt to force him off his own property?" "I was protecting the community," Patricia protested, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "We have standards in Mountain View Estates. We can't just have anyone moving in without proper vetting. There are procedures, applications, background checks." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, Mountain View Estates HOA has no jurisdiction over this property. Montgomery Ranch predates your development by 40 years. Furthermore, filing a false police report is a crime, especially when you claim to fear for your safety while confronting someone on their own land." Patricia's phone rang, and she answered it with shaking hands. "What? No? I can't talk right now. What do you mean the Water Commission is here? I didn't authorize any. They're saying, what about the creek?" Her face went even paler as she listened to whoever was on the other end. "That's impossible. We've been diverting that water for years for the golf course. They can't just..." She trailed off, her eyes darting between Ryan and me. I felt a cold realization wash over me. Montgomery Creek ran through the eastern edge of our property before flowing toward what was now apparently Mountain View Estates. My grandfather had held the water rights since the 50s. Rights that were transferred with the property deed. If Patricia's HOA had been diverting water without permission, they'd been stealing from us for God knows how long. "Ma'am," Ryan said, "I'm going to need you to come with me to the station. You're under arrest for filing a false police report and criminal trespassing." Patricia's shriek could probably be heard 3 counties over. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I have connections. My husband is golf buddies with the mayor." But Ryan was already pulling out his handcuffs, his movements calm and practiced. As he secured her wrists behind her back, Patricia continued her tirade. "This is a setup. You planned this. How convenient that your son just happens to be the responding officer." Ryan's voice was steady as he recited her Miranda rights. "Ma'am, I was dispatched to this call like any other. The fact that you filed a false report against my father is entirely on you. Now, please watch your head as you get in the vehicle." The sight of Patricia Whitfield, HOA Présidente Extraordinaire, being loaded into the back of a police cruiser while screaming about discrimination and lawsuits was something I'd probably remember for the rest of my life. As Ryan closed the cruiser door, muffling her continued protests, he walked back over to me. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded, feeling a mixture of amusement and exhaustion. Just another day in paradise. "Son, though I have a feeling this is just the beginning." Ryan's expression grew serious, She mentioned something about the creek. You might want to check into that. If they've been diverting water illegally, that's a whole other can of worms. I thought about the implications. Water rights in Colorado were serious business. And if Mountain View Estates had been stealing water from Montgomery Creek for their golf course and landscaping, we were talking about potentially millions in damages. I'll call the Water Commission this afternoon, I said. But first, I need to finish unloading. Want to help your old man out before you haul our friend to booking? Ryan grinned, the professional facade dropping for a moment to reveal the son I'd raised. Sure thing, Dad, but you might want to prepare yourself. If Patricia Whitfield is any indication of what the HOA is like, you're in for a fight. As we unloaded boxes together, Ryan filled me in on what he'd heard about Mountain View Estates. The development had been built 10 years ago, marketed as an exclusive community for Denver's elite, looking for mountain retreats. The HOA was notorious for its strict regulations and aggressive enforcement. They'd driven out several longtime residents of the area through lawsuits and harassment, always staying just within legal bounds. But they made a mistake with you, Ryan said, hefting a box marked garage tools. They didn't do their homework. If they had, they'd have known about me. About the water rights, about the fact that Montgomery Ranch is protected under the state's agricultural heritage laws. I paused, holding a box of Sarah's books. Agricultural heritage laws? Ryan nodded. Passed 5 years ago. Properties that have been in agricultural use for over 50 years and remain in the same family get special protections against development encroachment. Grandfather's cattle operation qualifies us easily. The HOA can't touch you legally. It was late morning by the time we finished unloading the essentials. Ryan had to take Patricia to be processed, but he promised to stop by after his shift to help with the heavier furniture I had coming the next day. As his cruiser disappeared down the drive, Patricia still visible in the back seat gesticulating wildly, I took a moment to really look at my property. The main house needed work, but it was solid, built by my grandfather with his own hands, using lumber from the property. The barn was still standing proud. Though it could use new paint, the pastures were overgrown but could be brought back with some effort, and there, running along the eastern boundary, was Montgomery Creek, its water sparkling in the sunlight, water that apparently had been stolen for years to keep some rich folks' golf course green. I was pulled from my reverie by the sound of more vehicles approaching. 3 expensive SUVs pulled up where Patricia's Range Rover still sat, and out stepped a delegation of what could only be more HOA board members. 2 men in golf attire and a woman in a tennis outfit that probably cost more than my truck approached, with the kind of determined stride that suggested they were used to getting their way. Mr. Montgomery, the lead man called out. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that came from decades of leisure rather than honest work. I'm Richard Brennan, Vice President of the Mountain View Estates HOA. I understand there's been a misunderstanding with our president. I leaned against my truck, crossing my arms. Misunderstanding? Is that what you call having someone arrested for filing false police reports and trespassing? Brennan's smile was as fake as his tan. Patricia can be overzealous in her duties. We apologize for any inconvenience. However, we do need to discuss your presence here and how it affects our community. The woman stepped forward, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. I'm Jessica Chen, HOA Treasurer. We've been maintaining the aesthetic standards of this area for years. And your ranch doesn't quite fit with our vision. I couldn't help but laugh. Your vision? This ranch was here when your grandparents were in diapers. If anything doesn't fit, it's your cookie-cutter development. The second man, who hadn't introduced himself yet, finally spoke up. Look, let's cut to the chase. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer for this property. $3 million cash. Closing in 30 days. You can retire somewhere nice. Maybe Florida. And everyone wins. The casual way he threw out $3 million told me everything I needed to know about these people. They thought everything had a price. Everyone could be bought. They had no idea they were dealing with someone who'd lost the only thing money couldn't replace. Not interested. I said flatly, this is my home. My wife wanted me to come back here. And that's what I'm doing. Jessica's perfectly painted lips curved into what she probably thought was a sympathetic smile. I understand sentiment, Mr. Montgomery, but you have to think practically. You're one man on 300 acres. That's a lot of maintenance, a lot of work. Wouldn't it be easier to take the money and enjoy your golden years? I pushed off from the truck and stood to my full height. Even at 62, I still had a good presence when I wanted to use it. Let me make something crystal clear. This land is not for sale. Not now. Not ever. And if I find out you've been stealing water from my creek for your golf course, we're going to have a much bigger problem than aesthetic standards. The three exchanged glances, and I saw the first crack in their confident facades. Brennan cleared his throat. I'm not sure what you're implying about water. Cut the crap. I interrupted. Patricia mentioned it on her phone call. You've been diverting water from Montgomery Creek. That's theft. Plain and simple. My grandfather secured those water rights in 1952, and they're ironclad. The unnamed man finally introduced himself, extending a hand I didn't take. Marcus Webb, HOA Secretary. Mr. Montgomery, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps we could arrange a more formal meeting to discuss how we can coexist peacefully. I looked at his extended hand until he awkwardly withdrew it. The only meeting I'm interested in is with the Water Commission to document how much you owe me for years of stolen water. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do, but they weren't ready to give up. Jessica pulled out a folder from her designer bag. Before you make any rash decisions, you should know that we've been documenting various violations on this property. Weeds exceeding regulated height, structures that don't meet current building codes, potential environmental hazards from old farming equipment. We could tie you up in court for years. I took the folder and flipped through it, noting the photos taken from the road, the creative interpretation of regulations that didn't even apply to agricultural property. You know what's funny? I said, handing the folder back. My son, the one who just arrested your president. He mentioned something about agricultural heritage protection laws. Seems like properties like mine are exempt from HOA regulations. But please, waste your money on lawyers if it makes you feel better. Brennan's face was getting red. Now see here, Montgomery, we've invested millions in developing this area into a premier community. We're not going to let one stubborn rancher destroy property values because he can't accept that times have changed. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Times have changed? You're right about that. Used to be a man's property, was his castle. Used to be water rights meant something. Used to be neighbors helped each other, instead of trying to run each other off. But some things don't change. This land is mine, and I'll defend it against anyone who tries to take it. Webb tried one more approach. What if we could work out a compromise? Perhaps we could purchase just the eastern portion. Where the creek runs, you'd still have plenty of land, and we could ensure our water access is formalized. There it was. The real reason they were so desperate. Without access to Montgomery Creek, their golf course would turn brown. Their artificial lakes would dry up, and their property values would plummet. They'd built their entire development on stolen water, and now the bill was coming due. Get off my property, I said quietly, and tell your lawyers to expect a call from mine. Every gallon of water you've stolen, every day you've trespassed to access that creek, it's all going to be accounted for. Jessica's composure finally cracked. You don't know who you're dealing with. We have connections, resources. We can make your life here absolutely miserable. I thought about Sarah, about how she'd faced down cancer with more grace than these people could muster on their best day. Lady, I buried my wife 6 months ago. There's nothing you can do to me that's worse than that. Now get out before I call my son back here to arrest the rest of you for trespassing. They left in a huff, their SUVs kicking up dust as they peeled out of my drive. But I knew this wasn't over. People like that didn't give up easily, especially when millions of dollars in property values were at stake. I spent the rest of the day setting up the basics in the house. But my mind kept wandering to what was coming. The water rights were clear, but enforcing them would be a battle. The HOA would throw every legal trick at me, try every form of harassment they could think of. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Sarah would have loved, I sat on the porch with a beer and considered my options. I could fight this alone, like I'd been doing everything since Sarah passed. Or I could be smart about it and start building my own alliances. The HOA might have money and connections. But I had something they didn't. Legitimate claims and the law on my side. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Dad, Patricia made it bail. Watch yourself. Also, Water Commission wants to meet tomorrow at 10. I'll try to be there. I smiled despite everything. Having Ryan nearby was going to be more valuable than I'd initially thought. The boy had grown into a good man. The kind who stood up for what was right, regardless of the politics involved. As darkness fell over Montgomery Ranch, I made a decision. They wanted a war, they'd get one, but it would be fought on my terms. With truth and law as my weapons. Sarah had always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Well, Patricia Whitfield and the Mountain View Estates HOA were about to find out just how stubborn a Montgomery could be when defending his home. The sound of coyotes howling in the distance mixed with the gentle babble of Montgomery Creek, and I raised my beer in a silent toast. To Sarah, to the ranch, and to whatever came next. They could come at me with all their money and lawyers and connections, but this was my land, my water, my heritage, and I'd be damned if I'd let them take any of it. The Water Commission meeting the next morning was held in a sterile government building that smelled like burnt coffee and copy paper. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my only suit that Sarah had insisted I keep for occasions like this. Ryan was already there in uniform, chatting with a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Director Michelle Hartley. She had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that comes from years of dealing with Colorado water disputes, and her handshake was firm enough to crack walnuts. Mr. Montgomery, she said, gesturing to a conference room. Your son has been filling me in on the situation. I have to say, if what he's describing is accurate, we're looking at one of the largest water theft cases in county history. I followed her into the room where two other commission employees were already setting up laptops and pulling up maps on a large screen. I've got the original water rights documentation from 1952. I said, pulling out a folder I'd retrieved from the ranch's safe that morning. My grandfather was meticulous about record keeping. Director Hartley examined the papers with the reverence of someone who understood their importance. In Colorado, water rights were more valuable than gold, and papers from the 50s were practically sacred texts. These are ironclad, she confirmed. Montgomery Creek. Full appropriation rights for agricultural use. Priority date of April 3rd, 1952. That predates any other claims by decades. Ryan leaned forward. What we need to know is how much water Mountain View Estates has been diverting and for how long. One of the technicians pulled up satellite imagery on the screen. We've been monitoring unusual usage patterns in this watershed for about 3 years, but we couldn't pinpoint the source. Look here. He pointed to an area where Montgomery Creek curved along my eastern boundary. There's clear evidence of diversion infrastructure. Pipes, pumps, the works. They're not even trying to hide it. I studied the images, my anger building with each detail. They'd built what looked like a professional irrigation system, complete with holding ponds and distribution networks. All of it fed directly into the golf course and the artificial water features that dotted Mountain View Estates. How much are we talking about? I asked. Director Hartley did some quick calculations. Based on flow rates and the infrastructure visible, I'd estimate they've been diverting approximately 3 million gallons per month during peak season, maybe half that in winter. Over 10 years, she paused, double-checking her math. We're looking at theft of roughly 300 million gallons of water. The room went silent. In Colorado? That wasn't just theft, it was a catastrophe. Water theft on that scale could result in criminal charges, massive fines, and the complete shutdown of the golf course. What's the value? Ryan asked. In terms of damages? Another technician pulled up current water market rates. At current agricultural water prices, we're looking at approximately $2.4 million in stolen water. But that's just the raw value. Factor in damages, interest, and penalties, and you could be looking at 10 million or more. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I'd expected it to be significant, but not this massive. No wonder the HOA was so desperate to buy me out. They knew they were sitting on a ticking time bomb. Director Hartley's expression was grim. Mr. Montgomery, I need to ask, Were you aware of this diversion before now? I shook my head. The ranch has been managed by a property company since my father passed. I just moved back yesterday. The HOA president mentioned something about water access. And that's what tipped me off. She nodded. Making notes. We'll need to conduct a full investigation. I'm sending a team out this afternoon to document everything. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you get a lawyer who specializes in water law. This is going to get ugly. As we left the building, Ryan walked me to my truck. Dad, you realize what this means? The HOA isn't just facing fines. If they can't pay the damages, they could lose the entire development. I thought about Patricia Whitfield in her designer clothes, Richard Brennan with his fake tan, Jessica Chen with her diamond bracelet. They made their bed. I said, Sarah always said that karma has a way of catching up. Looks like theirs just arrived with interest. Back at the ranch, I found a certified letter taped to my gate. The return address was a law firm in Denver, Brennan, Keller, and Associates. I opened it to find a cease and desist order, claiming I was harassing HOA members and interfering with established water access agreements. The letterhead was impressive. All gold embossing and legal threats, but the content was pure desperation. They were trying to establish some kind of prior claim to the water, probably hoping to muddy the waters legally before the commission's investigation got too far. I was still reading when a convoy of vehicles turned into my drive, not SUVs this time, but work trucks, water commission investigators in marked vehicles, followed by what looked like survey equipment and photographers. Director Hartley herself was leading the team, which told me she was taking this seriously. Mr. Montgomery, she called out, we're going to need access to the creek area. This might take most of the day. I waved them through, then noticed another vehicle following at a distance, a news van from the local NBC affiliate, complete with a satellite dish on top. Word was already getting out. Water theft on this scale was big news in Colorado, especially when it involved a wealthy development stealing from a traditional ranch. I could already imagine the headlines, exclusive mountain community built on stolen water, or OA's theft from historic ranch exposed. The reporter, a young woman with ambitious eyes, approached me as the investigation team headed toward the creek. Mr. Montgomery, I'm Rebecca Martinez from Channel 9. Can you comment on the water theft allegations against Mountain View Estates? I thought carefully before responding. Sarah had always said I was too blunt for my own good. But maybe that's what this situation needed. All I know is that my family has held the water rights to Montgomery Creek since 1952. If someone's been taking that water without permission, that's between them and the law. She pressed for more details, but I politely declined. Let the HOA sweat about what I might or might not say. The investigation would speak for itself. I spent the afternoon working on the house, trying to make it livable, while the Water Commission team documented years of theft. Every so often, I'd see them placing markers, taking photos, or measuring something with expensive-looking equipment. The news crew filmed it all from a respectful distance, and I had no doubt the footage would be on the evening news. Around 4 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Denver number I didn't recognize. Mr. Montgomery, this is Harold Watson from Watson & Sterling, attorneys at law. I represent several members of the Mountain View Estates HOA board. I think it would be in everyone's best interest if we could meet to discuss a resolution to this situation. I almost laughed. This morning they were sending cease and desist letters. Now they wanted to talk? Mr. Watson, I appreciate the call, but I think we're past the talking stage. Your clients have been stealing my water for a decade. That's not a misunderstanding, it's a crime. He persisted with the smooth tone of someone used to negotiating his way out of problems. Surely we can come to some arrangement. My clients are prepared to be very generous in compensating you for any past oversights. I looked out the window at the investigation team carefully documenting the elaborate theft system. Mr. Watson, your clients aren't in a position to be generous with money they got from selling houses based on stolen water. Tell them I'll see them in court. I hung up before he could respond. As the sun began to set, Director Hartley returned to the house with a grim expression. It's worse than we thought, she said, accepting the glass of water I offered with apparent appreciation for the irony. They didn't just divert from the main creek. They've got secondary taps into the seasonal tributaries. Underground pipes we can only see with ground-penetrating radar. This was a professional operation. Ryan arrived just as she was explaining the findings. Still in uniform, but off-duty. How professional are we talking? She pulled out a tablet showing a schematic. This wasn't some amateur job with a pump and a hose. They hired engineering firms. Got permits for landscape irrigation that conveniently failed to mention the water source. Someone in the county planning office had to know this was happening. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just the HOA. This was potentially corruption reaching into local government. Can you prove it? I asked. We'll need to pull permits. Cross-reference with the engineering plans. Interview contractors. She said. But yes, I think we can build a solid case. The question is how far up this goes and how many people were involved. As she left with her team, promising a full report within the week, I sat with Ryan on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. You sure you want to do this? Dad, he asked, you could still take their money and walk away. $3 million would buy you a nice place somewhere quiet. I thought about Sarah, about her last days in the hospital when she made me promise to go back to the ranch. She'd said it was where I belonged, where we'd been happiest. Your mother wanted me here. I said simply, and I'm not letting some country club thieves drive me off land my grandfather cleared with his own hands. Ryan nodded. Understanding. Then we fight. But you need to be prepared. People with this much money don't go down easy. He was right. Of course. The next morning proved it when I woke to find my driveway blocked by a massive RV. Not just any RV, but one of those luxury models that cost more than most houses. A man in his 70s stepped out as I approached, wearing a $1,000 suit despite the rural setting. Mr. Montgomery, he said with the kind of smile that had probably closed 1,000 shady deals. I'm William Thornton, principal investor in Mountain View Estates. I think it's time we had a frank discussion. I crossed my arms, standing between him and my house. Unless you're here to confess to water theft and offer full restitution, we don't have much to discuss. His smile never wavered. You seem like a practical man. Let me be practical with you. The Water Commission investigation is going to find what it finds. There will be fines, maybe some criminal charges for lesser figures, but in the end, my lawyers will tie this up in court for years. Meanwhile, you'll be spending your retirement savings on legal fees, dealing with constant harassment, unable to enjoy your ranch. He pulled out a check, already filled out. $5 million. Cash. No conditions except you drop the water claims and sell me the ranch. You can be in Florida by Christmas, sitting on a beach instead of fighting a war you can't win. I looked at the check. More money than I'd see in 10 lifetimes. Then I thought about Patricia Whitfield's sneer, about them calling my son out here on a false report, about the sheer arrogance of stealing water for a decade and then trying to buy their way out of it. Mr. Thornton, I said, let me tell you something about war. I did 2 tours in Vietnam. I've seen what real war looks like. This isn't war. This is just rich people learning they can't always get what they want. Now get off my property before I call my son back here to arrest you for trespassing. His mask finally slipped, showing the cold calculation underneath. You're making a mistake. Montgomery, I've crushed bigger men than you. By the time I'm done, you'll be begging to take whatever pennies I offer. Get out. I repeated. He left, but not before making sure I saw him on his phone. No doubt calling those expensive lawyers he'd bragged about. The battle lines were drawn now, clear as the mountain sky. They had money, lawyers, and connections. I had the truth, the law, and 300 acres of pure stubbornness. The harassment started that afternoon. First, it was small things. A delivery truck that got lost and blocked my driveway for hours. Mysterious calls to the county claiming I was running an illegal business. Someone reporting my truck as abandoned when I parked in town for groceries. Then it escalated. I came home from buying fence supplies to find surveyors on my property, claiming they were verifying boundary lines for the HOA. When I told them to leave, they said they had a court order. The order turned out to be a forgery, but it took Ryan 2 hours to sort that out. The next day, animal control showed up, saying they'd received reports of livestock abuse. I didn't even have livestock yet, but they insisted on inspecting the empty barn and pastures. The day after that, it was the health department, claiming someone had reported sewage issues. Each visit meant hours of my time, explaining, showing permits, proving I wasn't violating laws that didn't even apply to agricultural property, but I'd been through worse. Every harassment attempt was documented, photographed, filed away. Milavier, a young woman named Elena Vasquez, who specialized in water law and had a reputation for taking down corporate bullies, was building a countercase that would make their heads spin. They're panicking. She told me during one of our strategy sessions, the Water Commission report is devastating. We're not just talking fines anymore. The state attorney general is considering criminal charges. Thornton and his board could be looking at jail time. The thought of William Thornton in an orange jumpsuit almost made the harassment worth it. Almost. The real vindication came 2 weeks later at the county commissioners' meeting. It was supposed to be a routine session, but the room was packed. HOA members in their designer clothes on one side, local ranchers and longtime residents on the other. The media was there in force. Not just local, but some national outlets that had picked up on the story of a Vietnam vet standing up to a corrupt HOA. Director Hartley presented the Water Commission's findings with the kind of devastating thoroughness that left no room for doubt. Maps, photos, flow measurements, the works. 10 years of systematic theft, documented down to the gallon. When she finished, the commission chairman, an old rancher named Bob Martinez who'd known my father, looked like he'd swallowed a rattlesnake. Am I understanding correctly that Mountain View Estates has been stealing approximately 30 million gallons of water per year for a decade? Director Hartley nodded. That's conservative. Mr. Chairman, it could be more. The HOA's lawyer tried to spin it, talking about good faith mistakes and unclear boundaries. But nobody was buying it. The evidence was too clear. The theft too brazen. Then Elena stood up for our side. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this isn't just about water theft. This is about a systematic attempt to drive out traditional ranchers and farmers to make way for luxury developments. Mr. Montgomery is not the first victim, just the first to fight back effectively. We have evidence of similar tactics used against the Hendersons, the Yamadas, and the Prescott family, all of whom sold under duress after mysterious legal challenges and harassment. She presented her evidence with surgical precision, forged documents, falsified complaints, a pattern of harassment that stretched back years. The HOA hadn't just stolen water, they'd stolen a way of life from multiple families. By the time she finished, even some of the HOA members looked shaken. The commissioners voted unanimously to revoke Mountain View Estates' water access permits and referred the matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The HOA would have to find legal water sources or watch their golf course turn to dust. As we left the meeting, Patricia Whitfield intercepted me in the parking lot. She looked different, older somehow. The armor of her perfect appearance cracked. "I hope you're happy," she hissed. "You've destroyed everything we built. Property values are going to crater. People will lose their homes." I stopped, really looking at her for the first time. "Ma'am, you called the police on me for moving into my own home. You and your board stole millions of gallons of water and tried to bully me into selling. If people lose their homes, that's on you, not me." She deflated slightly. "We were just trying to protect our community." "No," I said firmly. "You were trying to protect your property values at everyone else's expense. There's a difference." I left her standing there and drove home to find Ryan's cruiser in my driveway. He was sitting on the porch with Duke, a German Shepherd puppy he'd brought me the week before, saying every rancher needed a good dog. "Heard the news?" he said as I joined them. "Complete victory. The DA's talking about RICO charges. Apparently, the FBI is interested too. Something about interstate wire fraud related to the property sales." I scratched Duke behind the ears, feeling the weight of the past month settling on my shoulders. It's not over. They'll appeal. Delay. Try every trick. "Maybe," Ryan agreed, "but the water's already being shut off." I drove by the golf course on the way here. The groundskeepers are draining the water features, trying to save what they can. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains. The ranch was quiet, except for Duke's contented sighs and the distant sound of Montgomery Creek flowing freely, no longer being stolen drop by drop. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Thornton's been arrested. Conspiracy. Fraud. Theft. Bail set at $2 million. I showed it to Ryan, who whistled low. Guess his lawyers weren't as good as he thought. Over the next weeks, the HOA imploded spectacularly. Board members turned on each other, trying to shift blame. The development's property values did crash, just as Patricia had predicted, but not because of me. Who wants to buy a house in a place known for systematic theft and corruption? Several families simply abandoned their properties, unable to afford the special assessments. The remaining HOA members levied to pay legal fees and fines. I felt bad for the innocent homeowners caught in the crossfire, the ones who'd simply bought houses not knowing about the theft. Elena helped me set up a program where they could purchase water rights at fair agricultural rates. Enough for household use, if not for elaborate landscaping. It was more generous than I needed to be, but Sarah would have wanted it that way. The golf course was converted to xeriscaping, beautiful in its own way, with native plants and rock gardens. It wasn't the emerald paradise the HOA had advertised, but it was honest, sustainable. Patricia Whitfield disappeared one night, leaving her house empty and her HOA presidency in ruins. Some said she moved back east to live with family. Others claimed she was in witness protection, cooperating with the federal investigation. I didn't much care as long as she was gone. Richard Brennan pled guilty to conspiracy charges and got 18 months in federal prison. Jessica Chen fled to Canada but was extradited back to face trial. Marcus Webb turned state's evidence and got probation in exchange for his testimony. William Thornton fought to the bitter end, spending millions on lawyers who couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence. He got 5 years in federal prison and fines that bankrupted him. The morning they led him away in handcuffs was the first time I'd smiled since Sarah's funeral. Justice might move slowly, but it does move. A year later, the ranch was thriving. I'd bought some cattle, hired a couple of local kids to help out, and even started a small program for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. The house was full of life again. The barn painted fresh red, and the sound of Montgomery Creek providing a constant reminder of victory. Ryan got promoted to detective, partly based on his handling of the water theft investigation. He still stopped by every Sunday for dinner, bringing Duke new toys and me updates on the continuing federal investigation. Turns out, Mountain View Estates was just one tentacle of a larger scheme involving developments across 3 states. My stand had started a domino effect that was bringing down a whole network of corruption. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, I raised a beer to the empty chair beside me. "We did it, Sarah," I said quietly. "We saved the ranch." The wind whispered through the grass, and for just a moment, I could swear I smelled her perfume, felt her presence beside me. Montana Creek gurgled in the distance, flowing free and clear, no longer stolen but restored to its rightful path. Duke came over and laid his head on my knee, and I scratched behind his ears as the first stars appeared in the Colorado sky. The HOA was gone. The thieves were in prison, and Montgomery Ranch stood strong, just as my grandfather had built it, just as my father had preserved it, and just as Sarah had known I would fight to protect it. Sometimes the good guys do win, especially when they're too stubborn to know when they're supposed to lose. And sometimes, that's exactly the kind of person the world needs. Someone who'll stand up to bullies with clipboards and designer clothes and say simply, "This is my land, and you can't have it." The coyotes started their evening song in the hills. Duke perked up his ears but didn't bark, already learning the rhythm of ranch life. Tomorrow there would be work to do. Fences to mend, cattle to tend, a life to build on the ashes of what the HOA had tried to destroy. But tonight, there was peace, earned through battle, but no less sweet for the fighting. And in that peace, I finally felt what I'd been searching for since Sarah passed. The feeling of being home, truly home, on land that no HOA could ever take away. As I headed inside for the night, the phone rang. It was Elena with one last update. "Jack, thought you'd want to know. The federal investigation just uncovered something interesting. Thornton had plans for your ranch specifically. There's a massive lithium deposit under your western pasture, worth hundreds of millions. I stood there in my kitchen, speechless. They hadn't just wanted the water, they'd wanted what was under the land too. You're sitting on a fortune. Elena continued. The government will probably approach you about mineral rights soon. I looked out the window at the land my grandfather had worked, where my father had raised cattle, where Sarah and I had planned to grow old together. Elena, I said finally, some things are worth more than money. The ranch stays as it is, let them find their lithium somewhere else. After I hung up, I opened Sarah's favorite photo album, the one she'd kept of all our years together. There was our wedding day. Ryan's first steps on this very porch, family gatherings stretching back generations, all of it on this land. All of it threatened by greed. All of it protected by one stubborn old rancher who'd learned that sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is simply refuse to give up. Duke curled up at my feet as I closed the album. And somewhere in the darkness, Montgomery Creek sang its ancient song, flowing free forevermore.